A woman fleeing her detrimental marriage mistakenly boarded the incorrect flight and seated herself next to an enigmatic man who was revealed to be a billionaire CEO. If you speak again, I assure you I will not show mercy. I am imploring you. Please allow me to leave just this once. The glass shattered before she could react. Emma recoiled as his hand struck her face forcefully, her cheek igniting with pain. She tasted blood. Her knees weakened, yet she remained standing for one sole reason. Mother! A faint voice trembled from the hallway. Their 5-year-old daughter, Lily, grasped a teddy bear, her eyes wide and lips quivering. She had witnessed everything. Emma's husband, Michael, pivoted abruptly towards the girl, the fury in his gaze transforming into something more sinister, contempt. "Return to your bed," he commanded. Lily whimpered and retreated down the corridor, her sobs scarcely subdued by her small hands. Emma felt the urge to weep, yet her tears had long since evaporated. She placed her palm against her swollen cheek and gazed at the man who had once vowed to safeguard her. That promise had dissipated, leaving only bruises and silence. That night, as the house fell silent and Michael succumbed to unconsciousness in his study with a partially consumed bottle of bourbon beside him, Emma stood in the bathroom, gazing into the mirror. The fluorescent light above her flickered. She traced the purple bruise along her jaw and the dried blood at the corner of her mouth. However, the most painful wound was not apparent. It lay concealed beneath years of seclusion, intimidation, and the gradual degradation of her former self. She recalled the initial instance he declared her worthless, the first occasion he inadvertently confiscated her phone for days, and the first time he seized her wrist with sufficient force to leave a bruise, subsequently offering an apology with flowers. There are no longer any flowers, only fear, silence, and the chilling echo of, "You brought this on yourself." Emma pressed her fingers to her lips to stifle a scream. She could not awaken Lily. Not tonight. If she did not depart now, she never would. She moved silently, her bare feet gliding softly on the hardwood floor. Each creak of the stairs accelerated her heartbeat. In the bedroom, she packed a small duffel bag with only the essentials. Clothing for Lily, her passport, and an old prepaid phone concealed in a shoebox behind her closet. She took Lily's favorite blanket, adorned with stars, and folded it meticulously. She stealthily entered her daughter's room, where the little girl lay curled up, thumb in her mouth, with a teddy bear nestled under her arm. Emma bent down, her voice scarcely audible. "Darling, we are embarking on a small adventure." Lily stirred. "Is Daddy coming?" Emma's voice faltered. "No, dear, just the two of us." Within moments, they were outside, the night air stinging their skin. Emma's hands shook as she secured Lily in the back seat of her car. She refrained from glancing back at the house. For the initial 10 minutes, she navigated the suburbs without headlights, her heart racing, each set of headlights trailing her, inducing trepidation. Her initial intention had been to drive directly to her sister's residence in Oregon. However, anxiety obscured her reasoning. What if he monitored her phone? What if he deduced her destination? At a petrol station 2 towns away, Emma made an impulsive choice. She would fly. It was more secure, expedited, and difficult to trace. She paid in cash at the airport, grasping Lily's hand with one arm and her duffel bag with the other. The attendant provided her with the sole remaining seat on the next flight. "Gate C-23, the woman stated. "Boarding commences in 20 minutes. Emma refrained from inquiring about the flight's destination. She merely nodded and continued onwards. Lily was drowsy, cuddling to her mother like a kitten. Her little fingers grasped Emma's scarf. At the gate, Emma ultimately examined the boarding pass. Her stomach churned. Colorado Springs. That was not Oregon. However, there was insufficient time to alter or contemplate. Michael may already be searching. She secured her hold on Lily and entered the aircraft. The cabin illumination was subdued. Emma traversed the aisle with her head bowed, recoiling at the flight attendant's salutation. Her seat was positioned in the rear. She positioned Lily on the window seat, enveloping her petite form with the starry blanket. Emma permitted herself a minute to breathe, only when Lily commenced breathing softly. Had I not departed tonight, perhaps by tomorrow, I would not be alive. She was unaware of their destination, yet she was cognizant of what they had abandoned, and that sufficed for the time being. May I take a seat here? The aircraft is at capacity. Emma gazed upward, taken aback. The man was tall, possibly around his mid-30s, clad in a simple gray jumper and pants. His hair was somewhat disheveled, as though he had repeatedly rubbed his hands through it. His speech conveyed a subdued lethargy, devoid of roughness, merely reflecting fatigue. She adjusted her position marginally. "Certainly," she whispered. He gave a brief nod and settled into the seat next her, positioning a slender leather carry-on beneath the seat in front of him. For a little moment, only the drone of the aircraft enveloped them, accompanied by the rustle of fellow passengers locating their seats and Lily's gentle respiration against the window. Emma adjusted her scarf, concealing the mark on her cheek. The fabric grazed her flesh uncomfortably, yet she remained indifferent. She had acclimated to concealing herself. From the periphery of her vision, she sensed his gaze upon her, not intrusive, only cognizant. She repositioned once more, attempting to orient herself towards Lily more while concealing her face in the shadows. The aircraft doors shut with a gentle thump. The captain's voice emanated via the overhead speaker. Conclusive verifications. Instructions for cabin personnel. Emma perceived none of it. She clutched the armrest firmly as the aircraft commenced its taxiing. Her heartbeat quickened, not due to a fear of flying, but from the burden of her recent actions. She was departing, fleeing, concealing herself with her child, bearing fresh bruises on her flesh and fear entwined in her breath. The aircraft ascended, a subtle tremor passing through the cabin. Emma gazed out the window and blinked. Subsequently, the tears emerged. She did not intend to weep. She exhibited strength throughout the night. For Lily, for her own sake, yet the view of the city lights diminishing beneath the clouds signifies a sense of finality. It shattered something within her. She swiftly lifted her hand to shield her face, but it was too late. The man adjacent to her remained silent. He refrained from directing inappropriate sympathy towards her or posing intrusive inquiries. He reached into his pocket, extracted a folded tissue, and extended it toward her. Emma paused momentarily before accepting it. "Thank you," she murmured. He offered a little nod and gazed directly forward. They were silent for several minutes. Emma cleared her eyes. Mortified by her own exhibition, she endeavored to regain her composure, inhaling deeply and slowly. Lily shifted slightly, then burrowed further into her blanket, unaware, yet his presence was not unwelcome. It appeared stable and composed, as though he comprehended the necessity for tranquility. She cast a fleeting glance at him. His gaze was concentrated on the tray before him, inscrutable. However, a palpable grief lingered, one she discerned. Not the boisterous type, but the subdued, familiar variety. A sorrow that resided in the marrow. "Are you traveling alone?" she inquired, astonished by her own question. He pivoted slightly, his gaze locking with hers. Indeed, his tone was subdued and tranquil. The temperature was not low. It simply did not seek attention. Emma acquiesced. "I share a same sentiment." He cast a brief look at the child adjacent to her and offered a gentle, empathetic grin. "She is your daughter." "Indeed," she remarked, a subtle smile playing at her lips. "Lily is 5 years old. She slumbers as if assured of her safety," he remarked softly. Emma had a constriction in her throat once more. She gazed downward, gently stroking Lily's forehead with her palm. "I am optimistic." The silence resumed, however it was altered this time. Neither unpleasant nor burdensome. The silence was characteristic of individuals who do not feel compelled to occupy every moment with sound. Emma gazed out the window, allowing the engine's soft hum to soothe her thoughts. Her fingers remained grasping the tissue in her lap. The man adjacent to her reclined his head, shutting his eyes. Neither party uttered another word for the remainder of the initial hour, although a change had occurred. Something tiny, nearly indiscernible. Two strangers, each with their own turmoil, found themselves adjacent in the sky. Not by preference, yet perhaps. Not all by chance, either. Upon landing, the lights of the modest airport illuminated the glass like remote signals. Emma slowly roused Lily, offering quiet encouragements as the girl scratched her eyes and yawned, still enveloped in her blanket. Upon disembarking the aircraft, Emma was abruptly confronted by a surge of reality. She possessed no strategy. Non-functional telephone. The power had depleted midway between security and the departure gate. Absence of a definitive destination. The address of her sister inscribed on a creased receipt. She mistakenly boarded the incorrect flight in a moment of terror. Individuals rushed by her at the terminal, reuniting with relatives, summoning ride shares, and departing for home. Emma remained motionless, disoriented. David observed. He halted beside her near the baggage claim, his hands in his coat pockets. "Are you awaiting someone?" She faltered, her lips separating and then rejoining. Ultimately, she declined with a shake of her head. "No, I simply erred. This is not the intended destination." He gazed at her intently and then softly remarked, "If you lack a destination, I am aware of a location." Emma tensed. "I am uncertain." He promptly clarified that it is not a city. A farm located approximately an hour's drive away, tranquil and isolated. It remains unknown to all. Your daughter and you would be secure in that location, at least till you ascertain the situation. She gazed at him, her eyes constricting. What is the rationale behind extending that offer to an unfamiliar individual? He met her stare unwaveringly. I had already been a stranger in need of refuge. A person assisted me. I am merely relaying it. She did not respond immediately, but as Lily grasped her hand, trembling in the cold, Emma considered her alternatives. A secluded location, distant from others, distant from him. She nodded slowly. Understood. The journey was silent. Lily dozed off once more in the rear seat of David's antiquated SUV. Her petite form nestled beneath Emma's cloak. Emma occupied the front seat, grasping her rucksack, observing the nightscape fade beyond the glass. David refrained from engaging in trivial conversation or probing inquiries, instead navigating the serpentine back roads, his headlights slicing through the darkness like strands of hope. The farm resembled a dream, concealed behind a line of pine trees, situated at the base of a gentle hill. A quaint farmhouse featuring whitewashed timber and bright yellow illumination emanating from the windows. Wildflowers bordered the pathway, and a gentle breeze rustled the grass despite the nocturnal calm. David assisted in transporting Lily indoors, while Emma inhaled the aromas of damp soil, aged timber, and a subtle floral note. "Is this home?" she inquired softly. "At present," he responded. "An upstairs guest room is available, furnished with clean sheets. I will prepare some tea for you." Emma was unprepared for the warmth that enveloped her as she entered. The hearth emitted a crackling sound. A kettle emitted a quiet whistle on the burner. A quilt was spread across the couch, and literature adorned the walls. She had not anticipated benevolence. Lily had once more succumbed to slumber, nestled beneath the covers on the guest bed. Emma descended the steps, intending to express her gratitude, but the warmth, tranquility, and fatigue overwhelmed her. She collapsed into a chair at the kitchen table, rested her head on her arm momentarily, and succumbed to slumber. Upon David's return, he saw her in that state, soundly asleep, her coat falling from her shoulders, exposing extensive bruises blossoming along one arm. The collar of her blouse had moved, revealing a scratch on her shoulder, inflamed and tender. He remained still for a brief interval. Subsequently, he discreetly placed the tea down. He opened a cabinet, extracted a tiny container of antiseptic ointment, and approached with deliberate steps. He knelt next to her and delicately caressed her arm, ensuring not to rouse her. She recoiled slightly, yet remained motionless. With utmost tenderness, he applied the cream to the open incision and subsequently placed a sterile pad over it. He replicated the action with the bruises, his hands firm and his expression inscrutable. Emma awakened, her eyes fluttering open. Dave and the other person's gaze intersected. David became immobile. She gazed at her arm, observed the open tin of ointment in his hand, and her heart faltered in her breast. "You were." "I apologize," he replied, retreating slightly. "I observed the contusions. I wished to prevent their exacerbation. I ought not to have." She elevated herself, hastily draping her scarf over her body. Her cheeks reddened, a combination of embarrassment and another emotion. "No," she replied gently. "Thank you." An uneasy yet not unpleasant silence ensued between them. Subsequently, she gazed at him, truly scrutinizing him. The dark circles beneath his eyes and the perpetual small slant of his brow suggested an unspoken burden he bore in silence. "What brings you here?" she inquired abruptly. David closed and opened his eyes rapidly. "Are you referring to the farm?" she inquired with a nod. He exhibited hesitation. "It is an extensive narrative." Emma offered a weary smile. "We have time." In that moment of silence, extending beyond a breath and softer than a heartbeat, an unspoken connection transpired between them. Neither trust nor love, just the initial flicker of a novel connection. Two fractured individuals in a secluded residence, in an overlooked location, and for the first time in an extended period, neither experienced profound solitude. Emma reclined on the farmhouse's rear porch as the sun descended beneath the horizon, adorning the sky with hues of orange and purple. Lily was within, sketching silently by the hearth. The atmosphere exuded the scent of soil and pine, and for once, it was devoid of trepidation. David emerged with 2 glasses of chamomile tea. He offered one to her and occupied the seat adjacent to her, mindful not to disrupt her tranquilly. They were silent for an extended period, merely imbibed and attuned to the chirping of crickets. Emma gazed across the expansive field, her fingers gliding along the edge of her mug. Subsequently, her voice, gentle and fractured, disrupted the tranquility. "I never anticipated that I would genuinely run," she remarked. David gazed at her, but remained silent. He remained in anticipation. Emma's fingers quivered slightly. Initially, it began with verbal altercations, escalating to shouting, followed by the tossing of objects, physical slaps, and ultimately more severe actions. She gulped. It ensured that no one observed the contusions. He would thereafter express remorse, purchase gifts for Lily, and vow to amend his behavior. However, it persisted incessantly. He exerted dominion over all aspects. Whom I conversed with, the time of my departure, and my attire. I ceased socializing with pals. My family believed I was only occupied. Her voice wavered. One night, he returned home inebriated. I was 6 months gestationally pregnant. He believed I was concealing funds. Stated that I intended to depart. He seized me by the hair and forcefully closed the door on my shoulder. Her hands clasped the mug firmly. I miscarried 2 days later. David's countenance remained unchanged. However, his knuckles whitened as he grasped the mug. Emma averted her gaze, blinking rapidly. No one trusted my account. The hospital report indicated natural problems. He informed everyone that I had fallen down the stairs. I nearly convinced myself that everything was my fault, believing that if I were better, more subdued, and more compliant, the situation would improve. Her voice faltered. David extended his hand, but hesitated, allowing it to linger beside hers on the porch railing. Emma observed. She extended her fingers towards his. Gradually, they made contact. "I remained for Lily," she said. "However, last week, he struck me in her presence." She cried and attempted to shield me with her small arms. A tear cascaded down Emma's cheek. I recognized the necessity of departure, even if it entailed concealment or beginning anew with nothing. David now faced her completely, his voice calm and resolute. "You performed the most courageous act possible." Emma emitted a hollow laugh. "I perceive myself as a coward." "You are not," he asserted firmly. "Cowards do not safeguard others. Cowards do not pursue freedom when the cost encompasses all they hold dear." She regarded him intently. "You articulate as one who comprehends." David exhaled deliberately. "I do." He placed his mug down and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. For a brief moment, he fixed his gaze on the ground, collecting fragments of his identity. My sister's name was Amelia, he stated. Intelligent, humorous. She would sing to herself while working. She had a passion for astronomy. Emma could identify constellations during daylight. She remained attentive and concentrated. She was in a relationship with a seemingly charming individual perceived by others as an ideal partner. Yet, in private, it was a tormenting experience characterized by emotional abuse and gaslighting. He estranged her from us, asserting that she was irrational, ineffectual, and damaged. David's jaw tightened. I failed to recognize the indicators until it was too late, preoccupied as I was with establishing a startup, traveling, pursuing funding rounds, and securing board approvals. One night, she called me in tears. I promised to return her call, but never did. A profound silence ensued. She succumbed to an overdose 3 days later. They claimed it was an accident, but I'm certain it was not. Emma covered her mouth, tears accumulating once more. The following month, I resigned as CEO. I could no longer bear to view another statistic or investor report. I liquidated all non-essential assets and purchased this property, retreating here to rediscover how to breathe. Without hesitation, Emma reached for him then. She embraced him, trembling. He reciprocated, his arms firm yet tender, their mutual grief intertwining them more profoundly than words could express. They remained in that position for an extended duration. Two fractured hearts united by the silence surrounding them. Not as lovers, not yet, but as survivors, as souls who had endured adversity and emerged to recount their tale. Upon their separation, David gazed into her eyes. There is no obligation to divulge further unless you are prepared. However, rest assured that no one will inflict harm upon you again. Emma dried her tears with the back of her hand and nodded. For the first time in years, she embraced this belief. Deep within the layers of bruises, fear, and sorrow, hope reignited. Emma remained immobilized in the kitchen, her hands quivering subtly as she gazed at the article displayed on David's open laptop. She had intended merely to shut the screen after delivering him tea, but the headline loomed at her in stark black letters. Disappeared billionaire. The silent fall of tech prodigy David Whitmore. Her eyes traversed the page, her heart racing with each line. It encompassed all the details. David co-founded a groundbreaking AI startup that transformed the industry. He was celebrated as a genius, a visionary, and a future titan. Subsequently, tragedy struck with his sister's death, followed by a company scandal and his abrupt resignation. He disappeared from the public sphere without explanation, leading to rampant speculation. Some claimed he was in hiding. Whispers of a breakdown circulated. Now, he resided in a tranquil farmhouse assisting her, a woman fleeing solely from anguish. She was oblivious to his entrance. Emma. David's tone was soft. Is everything satisfactory? She turned, startled, her complexion reddening as she retreated from the laptop. I did not intend to intrude. I just observed the situation. Is it acceptable? He interrupted, his gaze gentle. You were destined to discover this eventually. Emma hesitated, then inquired, her tone tense. Why did you not disclose your identity? David averted his gaze. Because I wish for it to be inconsequential. She crossed her arms, feeling hurt and cautious. Yet it does matter. You are someone renowned globally. I am merely a woman who narrowly evaded danger with my child concealed in a suitcase. You are not merely anything, Emma. Then why? She inquired, her voice escalating. Why did you assist me? Why did you bring me here? What do you desire from me? David advanced slightly, yet maintained his distance. Nothing. I desire nothing. He exhaled slowly. I wanted someone to perceive me without acknowledging all that. Devoid of wealth, status, and sorrow, I contemplated perhaps you could. Her jaw clenched, her breath unsteady. Well, perhaps I cannot. A silence enveloped them, taut as a wire poised to break. Emma's voice softened yet trembled. You are benevolent, David. You provided Lily and me solace in our time of turmoil. However, I now comprehend your true nature, she said, averting her gaze and blinking rapidly. I do not belong in your realm. It was never my destiny. You should reside wherever you feel secure. Emma emitted a hollow laugh. You fail to comprehend. I have endured an extensive period of feeling insignificant, as though I had to plead merely to exist. Now, standing beside someone of your caliber only accentuates my lingering sense of diminutiveness. David's voice was subdued. I never intended to evoke such feelings in you. I understand, she murmured. However, it does not alter the reality. She averted her gaze, biting her lip forcefully, as if restraining more than mere words. I should depart. David remained still. His throat constricted, yet he nodded once. If that is what you require. She anticipated him to implore her to remain. He did not. The pain was greater than she had envisioned. The following morning, Emma packed silently while Lily slumbered. She left a brief note on the kitchen table. Thank you for everything. I hope you find peace, too. David discovered it later that day. He sat at the table, her vacant teacup remaining on the counter, her fragrance lingering in the atmosphere. He did not weep. He remained motionless for an extended duration, his gaze fixed on the note, fingers grazing the paper as if attempting to sense her essence through it. He reassured himself that she required distance, that he had no authority to retain her. However, as the sun descended and the farmhouse resonated with silence, he recognized another truth. He yearned for her laughter. He longed for Lily's footsteps upon the wooden floor. He longed for the sensation of companionship. That evening, David stepped onto the porch, gazing into the void where her silhouette had previously lingered, observing the stars. For the first time since Amelia's demise, he murmured into the darkness, I desire her return. The following day, he initiated several inquiries and commenced his search. The shelter emitted a subtle aroma of lavender and disinfectant. Emma grasped Lily's petite hand as they entered through the glass doors, both adorned in second-hand jackets and enveloped in a profound fatigue that surpassed mere physical injuries. This way, Ms. Turner, the intake coordinator remarked quietly, guiding them into a warm, softly illuminated room. A mural depicting sunflowers adorned the distant wall, with sunlight radiating from behind their petals. For the first time in weeks, Emma allowed herself to exhale. In the following days, the center transformed from a mere refuge into the first location in years where Emma felt unpursued. The staff offered legal assistance, counseling, and facilitated school enrollment for Lily. At night, Emma positioned herself on a cot adjacent to her daughter's bed, attuned to her gentle respiration, sensing the burden of survival gradually dissipate. The divorce hearing approached swiftly. Emma faced the judge, her hands trembling, yet her voice remained composed. She had compiled documents, photographs, and a testimonial from a former neighbor who had previously reported her husband to the authorities. The judge listened attentively. The courtroom remained silent as Emma recounted years of isolation, degradation, and control, culminating in the decisive moment that compelled her to flee. Her husband failed to appear. When the verdict was announced, granting Emma full custody and a restraining order, she did not weep in the courtroom. She waited until she and Lily were outside, seated on the courtroom steps, the sunlight warming their faces. "Mama, are we truly free now?" Lily inquired, her tone gentle and uncertain. Emma embraced her daughter and murmured, "Yes, dear, we are." For the first time, it was indeed the truth. Weeks elapsed. Emma commenced her volunteer work at the shelter that had rescued them. She undertook modest tasks, such as organizing supplies, sanitizing rooms, and reading stories to the children while their mothers consulted with counselors. However, news of her bravery and resilience circulated. Women were attracted to her, captivated by the quiet fortitude in her gaze and her non-judgmental, listening demeanor. Before long, she was facilitating peer groups, recounting her narrative, and the participants listened, some with tears, others with cautious optimism. Emma never claimed to possess all the solutions, yet she offered something else, evidence that liberation was attainable, that existence thereafter could still be meaningful. One afternoon, while organizing donated garments, a staff member presented her with a small envelope. "A package arrived for you," as they indicated. It was handwritten and lacked a return address. Emma opened it cautiously, her hands quivering slightly. Within was a solitary sheet of lined paper. The text was meticulously inscribed, uneven in sections, suggesting the writer had paused between each sentence. "Dear Emma, you are unfamiliar with me, yet I am acquainted with your narrative. 2 months ago, I was in a group, seated at the rear. You did not observe my tears, yet I wept. I had never disclosed to anyone the actions of my husband towards me. I believed I had to endure and that it was too late to escape. However, after listening to your address, I devised a plan. I waited until he was at work, took my son, and departed. We are currently in another shelter. Although the situation is challenging, we are safe. I wanted to convey this to you. Thank you for your initial courage. It inspired me to believe in my own bravery." Emma read the letter thrice, then seated herself on the edge of the storage bench, allowing her tears to flow. These were not tears of fear or sorrow, but of a profound joy that ached. Lily discovered her moments later and ascended into her lap. Emma embraced her daughter tightly, the letter grasped in one hand, her heart brimming with an unexpected sensation. Purpose. Previously, she had traversed the night, uncertain of her survival. Now, her voice had assisted another in discovering the dawn. She had transcended mere survival. She was now engaged in saving. The community center hummed with subdued dialogue as individuals entered and occupied the unpretentious hall. The folding chairs emitted creaks, and the aroma of coffee and cookies permeated the atmosphere. At the forefront of the room, a banner proclaimed, "Rising from the ashes, stories of survival." Emma positioned herself near the podium, fine-tuning the microphone, her palms somewhat perspiring. Although she had performed this task numerous times, each occasion still resembled a precarious venture. However, an internal transformation had occurred over the preceding months. Her voice had become more resolute, her gaze more assured. She was no longer recounting her narrative merely for survival. She recounted her experience to instill belief in others' survival. Lily sat silently in the front row, swinging her feet beneath the chair, radiating pride. The moderator introduced Emma, and courteous applause resonated throughout the room. She advanced, cleared her throat, and commenced. "My name is Emma Turner," she stated, her voice composed. "Not long ago, I perceived myself as invisible." She recounted her experience succinctly and candidly. The silence, the domination, the trepidation. Then came the night she decided to escape. She refrained from embellishment or dramatization. Her words struck like stones in calm water, understated yet profoundly resonant. "I believed I possessed nothing," she stated, her tone softening. "Yet I retained one thing. I had my daughter. I faced a decision." The audience was attentive, some visibly emotional, while others acknowledged with subtle nods. Emma inhaled deeply, prepared to conclude her address. However, the moderator interrupted once more. "We have an additional guest speaker, someone who requested to present a surprise." Emma blinked, perplexed. This was not included in the plan. Then she beheld him. He was ambulating down the aisle at a leisurely pace, hands concealed within the pockets of a charcoal coat, the collar slightly raised against the cold. His hair had grown marginally longer. His eyes were veiled with emotion. "David." Emma's heart halted. He ascended the stage and orientated himself towards the crowd, his gaze briefly scanning the audience before settling on her. "I am David Callahan," he stated softly. "I was formerly the CEO of one of the nation's rapidly expanding companies." A murmur ensued as the audience leaned closer. "I possessed everything: power, prestige, a penthouse, and recognition, yet none of it held significance. Not after I lost my sister. Not after I recognized my inability to safeguard the person I cherished most from someone who professed to love her." He hesitated, swallowing with difficulty. "Subsequently, I vanished. I departed from the city and the enterprise. I existed in solitude. Then, One day, on an aircraft I had no intention of boarding, I found myself seated next to a woman who bore the weight of her entire existence in a backpack and a shroud of bruises. Emma clasped her mouth, her eyes widened in astonishment. David now addressed her directly. The room blurred around them. She refrained from tears initially, merely gazing out the window as if she had already departed. However, when she eventually wept, she exemplified true courage. He approached, his voice subdued yet distinct. She remarked, "I saved her life, but in reality, she saved mine." Gradually, David knelt on one knee, not with a ring, nor with a pledge of eternity, but with unadulterated, quivering sincerity. "I did not arrive to solicit your affection," he stated. "I came to request an opportunity, a chance to begin anew, to accompany you, to become acquainted with your daughter, to gain your trust. Not because you are indebted to me, but because my heart remained when you departed." Tears cascaded down Emma's cheeks. The room was hushed, devoid of breath. Emma advanced slowly, her entire body quaking. She gazed down at him, into the eyes that had previously witnessed her at her nadir without flinching. "You discovered me," she murmured. David nodded. "I never ceased searching." She descended to her knees before him, her arms encircling his neck. He embraced her firmly, not as a savior or a CEO, but as a man who had discovered something extraordinary and would never relinquish it. Lily dashed onto the stage, enveloping them both in her arms, prompting the audience to erupt in applause, not for success, but for redemption. Love reemerged, not as a fairy tale, but as a tangible, hard-won reality. 1 year later, the morning sun ascended gradually over the hills, illuminating the fields behind a humble 2-story farmhouse. The wooden sign at the gate displayed in refined lettering, "The Second Chance Home." It was not merely a refuge, it was a commitment. The location thrummed gently with vitality. Children's laughter resonated from the backyard. Wind chimes chimed in the breeze, and fresh bread was baking in the kitchen. Women traversed the hallways, some still bearing shadows in their eyes, while others began to smile once more. David knelt in the garden with 2 children beside him, their hands immersed in soil as they planted wildflowers. His sleeves were rolled, and dirt adorned his cheek. He had long departed from boardrooms and cameras, discovering tranquilly in the deliberate cadence of planting, repairing, and instructing. Within the house, Emma positioned herself by the window, holding a cup of tea in one hand and a substantial manuscript in the other. The cover bore the title, "The Day I Chose to Live" by Emma Turner. The book had recently been published. It narrated her journey, not as a victim, but as a woman who had discovered her voice, strength, and purpose. It was already attracting interest from survivor organizations, educational institutions, and talk shows. However, Emma was less concerned with notoriety at this point. Her primary desire was for someone who felt isolated and fearful to read her words and embrace the potential for a different existence. Today, however, was not centered on literature or architecture. Today was dedicated to love. The backyard had undergone a transformation. White chairs adorned the grass. String lights shimmered between the trees. A makeshift altar was positioned beneath a wooden arch entwined with wildflowers. Seated in those chairs were not prominent guests or celebrities, but rather women, children, volunteers, social workers, and individuals who had sought refuge here. A collective of individuals who had forged a bond, a selected kinship. David stood adjacent to the altar, appearing unexpectedly attractive in a new navy shirt and suspenders, his customary boots meticulously polished. He anxiously rubbed his palms. Emma emerged at the periphery of the backyard, grasping Lily's hand. She donned a modest ivory dress, soft and flowing, complemented by a crown of freshly braided daisies in her hair. Her gaze met David's amidst the throng, and all else diminished. As she approached him, Lily grasped her hand and murmured, "Mom, I believe today is magical." Emma smiled through her tears. "Indeed it is.